Hello, everyone. Yes, it's now obviously to talk about Brooks Poston, who's obviously was a Manson family member, and he was with them right up until Barker Ranch. Must have been arrested at Barker Ranch with them, and this is his police interview we're going to be listening to tonight. And though Helter Skelter wasn't the real motive, they obviously did actually talk about this a lot. It was real. It wasn't just made up by Bugliosi, though they actually had other motives for the murders. It was obviously something they spent a lot of time talking about, and Bugliosi exploited this. So it's interesting to listen to the interviews of guys like Brooks Poston, and he talks about other interesting aspects of life as well that we'll get into, obviously, as it goes on to. But yeah, life being a family member and how weird it was. But yeah, welcome to the stream. Welcome if you're new. I've had some new subscribers recently. Yeah, hit the like button. I see people saying in the chat as well, if you haven't already, and subscribe if you haven't. Yes, so we'll get into it pretty quickly. Yeah, I'll just say hello to everyone. Yeah, and the Super Bowl is on tonight, so yeah, I'm probably going to lose views because of that. I'm sorry about the false start. If anyone saw that, I hope that hasn't confused people who are going to the original link. I accidentally hit go live before I meant to and ended the stream, and when you do that, that just completely vanishes the stream. You have to start all over again. Nightmare. Oh yeah, he did an album with Paul Watkins. I found it as well. I shared it on the subreddit and in the Facebook group. The music, yeah, sounds very family-esque sort of music, yeah, folky kind of stuff. And yeah, as far as I know, he is still alive. I saw someone saying in the chat, "Is he still alive?" I didn't see that he had died anyway. Anywhere, and there's a TV interview with him. There's probably a couple actually, but there's one of him from the early 70s. So yeah, I'll see how long it takes us to get through this police interview anyway. Might be able to watch the TV interview. Yeah, like I say, guy who was a Manson family member, essentially.
CieloDrive.com Audio Archives.
It's October the 3rd, 1969, 11:15 hours. This is a taped interview with Brooks Ramsey Poston, 20 years, WMA.
Is this loud enough for everyone?
You can keep it away from out there.
I met Charles Willis Manson at the beginning of June in 1968. The first thing I saw him do was kneel and kiss a guy's feet. And he was at Dennis Wilson's house at that time, 14400 Sunset Boulevard, living with 5 girls. The girls were a girl named Lynn, Sandy Good, Diane Bluestein, and Brenda something or other. And I don't remember the other girl's name because she left shortly thereafter. Charlie told Lynn to take the people I was with to a place to stay. It was called the Spiral Staircase House on Topanga Lane. And as soon as we got there, or shortly thereafter, approximately 30 minutes, the Malibu sheriffs came and took us all in for questioning. Released 3 of the people and sent 3 back to Ukiah from where we came. The 3 remaining went to Dennis's house to stay for the night. And the next day, Charlie had the same girl, Lynn, take us to Spawn's Movie Ranch in Santa Susana Mountains in Chatsworth.
Did you have any?
And while at Dennis's house, Dennis wasn't home at the time.
See, there's lots of points where the tape seemed to stop as well. See, there was one there. I don't know if people noticed that. But yeah, there's lots of times where the tape seems to stop and then start again. That was one. But yeah, he's talking about them getting arrested at the Spiral Staircase house. And then saying that day was when they got taken to Spahn Ranch. Interesting, but the tape seemed to stop there.
They had marijuana and some hashish, and I don't know what else. They were using drugs at the time. The people I was with stayed at Spawn's Ranch for approximately 2 days, where at that time Dean Morehouse, one of the guys I was with, went back to Charlie's house and took us with him, the other 2. And well, Charlie was back at Dennis's then, and when we were at Dennis's, Dean talked to him and got us to stay there. And Dean and I took care of the yard as gardeners. And all this time, Charlie began to work on me and tell me that
Yeah, I think so
everything
too, yeah.
was all
Got
right, that
bits
there
out.
was no crime, no sin. And at one point, I saw a man kneel and kiss his feet, and Charlie asked him if he was ready to die at that instant. And the guy said yes. And Charlie said, then you can live forever. And that was the first time I had any indication that he was, I guess, playing the part of Jesus Christ. And later, he told me that I had to be me before I could be him, because he was a reflection of me. And he was only what I saw in myself. And that the Battle of Armageddon, or whatever it's supposed to be, is at hand. And Dennis's manager finally made Charlie leave, because Charlie only wanted Dennis's money and his clothes and to play with Dennis's cars and motorcycles. And Charlie recorded while he was at Dennis's. He recorded an album, I believe. And Charlie had to leave. During the meantime, I had recorded, and Charlie told me that I didn't need to do that because money wasn't important. You could live out of garbage cans and live in condemned houses and never need money. Charlie called after he left and wanted to know if everyone else was out. And I said yes, everyone was gone but me. And he asked me to leave. And he came over a little while later and had me go with him through some sort of, I don't know, I thought he was Jesus at the time too. So I went with him and we went to Spawn's Ranch. And Charlie and the girls stayed at the back the first night we were there, and then moved up to the front part of the ranch into the movie set and stayed in the jail and the saloon. And Charlie had me shoveling horse manure and saddling horses and working there as ranch hand. And that's where I met George and Pearl and Randy Starr, a stuntman, Benny Dietrich, and Juan Flynn, and Larry Craven, all ranch hands there. And shortly thereafter, Charlie ran a group of hippies that was living in the back and paying rent to George, ran them off, and moved into those houses himself. And I stayed up front, and they let me have a little shack that another cowboy was using until he hitchhiked out to go to the rodeos in Dakota. His name was Jerry Hill. And while they were at Spawn's, I know of LSD being there, and marijuana, and hashish. And when Charlie was living at the back ranch house, people were always driving in down to the back ranch house, long-haired people, hippies, and they all seemed to have enough money to drive around and get what they wanted, but I don't know where any of it came from. And Charlie always had money when he wanted it, and I don't know where that came from. And he was always coming back. He'd hitchhike into San Fernando Valley.
So who are these people in cars as well, these rich-looking people that went to the houses at the back to get whatever they wanted? What did he mean by that as well? Was he implying what, drugs, women, what?
And he'd come back with an old car that was in good running condition and say that someone had given it to him, that he had the pink slip to it. And he would wind up giving it to George so that George would let him stay there. One way I believe he gets his money, and his money for gasoline and car parts, is through credit cards that he talks people out of. He talked me out of a Texaco credit card that my mother had given me before I left Texas, and I thought it was only for his use, and it wound up, from what I heard, going up into Oregon, all up the coast of California, and possibly to Washington. And the card was picked up later, and I had a letter from my mother and a couple of phone calls that said that she wasn't going to pay the bills and that Texaco was wondering when the bills would be paid. And I told her that I would pay the bill and the bill was approximately $250. And since that time, I've had no money because at the ranch that I worked on, George didn't pay a salary. He merely lets you stay there and have food and a pack of cigarettes a day and your place to sleep. But at the time it was pretty good because it was the first time I'd been out in the world. One of Charlie's basic creeds is that all the girls are for is to fuck or make love. And that's all they're for, and that there is no crime, there is no sin, that everything's all right, that it's all just a game, just like games of a little kid, only it's grown-up games, and that God's getting ready to pull down the curtain on this game and start it over again with his chosen people. And Charlie considers himself to be Jesus, the second coming of Christ, and that he is to lead 144,000 people out onto the desert from reading things into the Bible from Revelations. And he feels that the Beatles are the four-headed locusts that's mentioned in there that are here to plague man with their mouths. And he listens to all their records while under the effects of LSD or any other drug he can get a hold of. And he puts into there the meanings that he wants in it. And he has body control of his hands and his arms and his fingers to the point that it's like watching something that constantly changes when he's moving. It doesn't ever appear to be the same on any two movements. And while everyone that he's with is on the effects of these drugs, he uses his hands and his fingers and says that he can pass the motion on to you when you get tuned in to the infinite. Or when you give up, is what he calls it, and play under everyone. Play under the awareness of all people. And to play under the awareness of all people is to be able to steal and to be able to do all things that people couldn't do because they weren't smart enough. And he's talked about his prison experiences and where he's learned many things about hypnosis and what you can do with the power of the mind from a man named Lanier Raymer, who was a cellmate. As far as I know, the whole group was there at Spawn's. Charlie and
Lanier Raymer's an interesting bloke as well. Yeah, he said a lot about Charles Manson. He's the one where these rumours of him taking LSD and some kind of experimental treatment and being thrown into the hole come from, this Lanier Raymer, matey. And he contacted Charlie after he was out of prison as well. We'll have to talk about him another time. He's a Scientologist as well. Interesting bloke. Yeah, talk about him on another stream.
and his people living in the back, and myself and Juan and the cowboys living up front and doing the ranch work for approximately 3 or 4 months, all summer, and a month or maybe a month and a half into the fall. During this time, several people had come along, and he had persuaded them in the same manner that he was Jesus, and that everything man did was backwards to what it was supposed to be, and that making love was good and not bad, and that group orgies was the way to get tuned in. And he had convinced several girls, and he's got them tied up in this manner, and also through fear, because he's beaten up several girls that I know of. One, Mary Brenner, and another girl he beat up was Diane Bluestein. I've seen him jerk her around by her hair and slap her and make her cry and hit her and do all kinds of things with her and make her suck guys' dicks and other girls, the ones that don't like to be there but don't know what else to do, such as Sandy Good. She's been more or less cajoled or talked into it or threatened into getting money from her dad from San Francisco on several occasions in order to finance the group. And he's made her do all kinds of acts that she didn't want to do, but he'd grab her by the head and shove her head down, and while he was making love to her at the same time. And this is part of his group orgy effect. He wants everybody to do everything, and you can make love with 6 or 7 people at the same time if you get tuned in, is what he says. And from the Spawns Ranch,
It's disturbing that to hear him say that he saw the girls being forced to do these things, because when people talk about the orgies that Charlie supposedly orchestrated, they make it sound like everyone was consenting, but he's saying there that he saw girls being forced to do things they didn't want to do. And I don't know if he means Diane Lake, if that was another name for Diane Lake. But she was obviously only about 14, 16 when they all got arrested, so between the ages of 14 and 16. I don't know if that is the same Diane, though. That could be another Diane. But they all used different names as well, didn't they? But yeah, disturbing to hear that they were being forced into things. Yeah.
several people came along. This is where Kathy Myers came, and she knew of a place in the desert in Death Valley that her grandmother owned, Myers Ranch. And at the end of September, or partway through October 68, she led everyone up, and the transportation used was an old green school bus that they painted and fixed up on the inside to look like a Muslim harem sort of effect, with satins and silks and tapestries. And I don't know where the money came from this, but I believe it was from a girl named Joan Wildbush that he'd also talked into giving away all her money, and a camper outfit that she later was to trade in for a four-wheel drive Jeep in Las Vegas. We took the bus to the bottom of Goler Wash and hiked up 7.5 miles to Myers Ranch. And on the way, Charlie and the rest of them all of us spotted this Barker's Ranch. And a couple of days after we were there, we moved into Barker's Ranch and cleaned it up and did all kinds of things, patching water line and watering trees and things. And shortly thereafter, Ballarat Bob, or Bob Dunlap, came up with a friend of his, because Ballarat Bob had previously stayed there, and he considered it more or less his place. But when he got there, he found a large group of people, and there were only two of them, so I don't know if he was afraid to do anything or what. But he left the next day and came back, I believe, once after that later, near Christmas, and I haven't seen him since. While at Barker's Ranch, part of the rules was that while it was warm enough, that everyone was to go nude, so that I suppose that would stimulate sexual interest, and everybody would wind up making love all day long. And I heard him comment once that wouldn't it be nice if we could just stay in bed forever and make love and not have to worry about eating, because eating wasn't important. It was only a way to get out your sexual interests, like smoking cigarettes. And he said that everything stemmed from sex. And I suppose he got that idea from Lanier Raymer in prison.
Yeah, talk about the girls and why they weren't leaving as well. I'm just seeing in the chat people talking about this. Yeah, but it's like he had them. A lot of them renounced their parents, didn't they? Completely. He had them totally renounce their parents, which is something that abusive dudes do. Is they cut you off from your family and your friends, and make you entirely dependent on them. And he picked them up from all over the country, hadn't he? A lot of them were far away from where their families were. All that sort of thing, and it was a weird situation as well, wasn't it? Even weirder than normal, because he had them believing he was Jesus as well, and they were all taking all these drugs, weren't they? And they were very young. A lot of the girls were very young too. You have to remember that. None of them really much older than their early 20s, were they? And some were as young as like 14. There were young children there as well, weren't they? It's a disturbing situation, very much. But it's like, that's why they didn't just leave, even though, some of them were from rich backgrounds. And he used to get them to bring their parents. He was saying that, wasn't he, a minute ago? That he got Sandy to get her parents to give them money and all that sort of thing. But it was like that sort of, traveling back to wherever they came from as well. It would be difficult, wouldn't it? Without, but I suppose they were seasoned criminals by then, so they'd have been able to steal a credit card or something, wouldn't they? Yeah. But they were all just totally devoted to Charlie, weren't they, as well? They worshipped him like a god, sort of thing.
or from a Freud book he read, but everything was
Yeah, the near again.
or penal, and that it all stemmed from sex. Everything that you did was make love, from putting a screw into a fixture, from putting a cigarette in your mouth, from drinking coffee, to opening a door, to getting in a car, to sweeping. Anything you did was sex from his viewpoint, and he was telling everyone there that that was what it stemmed from, that that's all it was. Everything was making love, and that was what God really wanted you to do, because that's why he gave men a nutsack and a Peter, and girls a pussy, as he puts it.
That didn't last very long, you got it?
He said that a woman actually had no soul, but was closer to being tuned in than the man, because God put woman there to take care of man, and that was all woman was supposed to do, take care of him and tend to his wants at all times, and she wasn't to give any opinions or talk to the man or say anything, and that you could put your love into her through sex and fill her up with your love. And he would always say, do what your love says do. But before he would say this, he would say that he was your love. And so it was implied around in this sort of a comment that you were to do everything he said, because he would do anything for you. He said that he died on a cross once for you, and that it was the Christians' turn to hang the Romans on the crosses. And that the hippies were the Christians, and that at this time he was talking about getting 144 people out of the desert. 144,000 people out of the desert, because it said somewhere in the Bible in Revelations about 144,000 people being on the desert, or being with Jesus and living in a land of milk and honey underneath the ground. And he's looking for a cave that he says is underneath Death Valley, that leads down to a city of gold that the Indians know about, and that every tuned-in tribe of people that's ever lived, the most tuned in, have escaped the destruction of their race by going underground, and that they're all living down in a gold city where there's a river that runs through it of milk and honey, and a tree that bears 12 kinds of fruit, a different fruit every month or something like that, and that you don't need any candles or any flashlights down there, because it will be lit up, because there will be something of a sun effect down there, that the walls will glow, and that you won't be cold and you won't be too hot, that there will be warm springs and fresh water and all things that you can eat, and people already down there waiting for them.
Tape stops again.
During the time we were at the desert, there were several supply runs made to Las Vegas and to Los Angeles. And around the time of the floods, about the time of the floods, in February of '69, the two girls, one named Joan Wildbush and another named Sherry, were sent to get supplies.
It does, doesn't it? It sounds like they're stopping
They
it.
came back and mentioned
Telling him what to
something
say at certain points, yeah.
after Sheriff Ward had been there, and Juanita was the only one left, as they had heard the sheriff was coming up, and Charlie sent a truck up to get all the people out that he could, or that he wanted out, and he left Joan Wildbush and myself up there to face the sheriff and to go to jail for something that I didn't even know was going on. And after the sheriff had come and taken our names down and left, Joan mentioned something about there had been marijuana given to the Sheriff Ward's niece or stepdaughter or something like that when they were passing through Kishon. He left once somewhere around January and said that he was going to find a place in the city for the people to stay in the winter. This is Charles Manson. And he took quite a few people with him. And then he sent another group up to get people out. And he left 3 people there at that time. Myself, Joan Wildbush, and a girl named Gypsy. And I don't know her last name. And about a week went by, and a Jeep came up the Jeep that Juanita had traded for. Juanita is Joan Wildbush, and picked up the 3 remaining and took us to a house in
Yeah,
Canova
the
Park.
date of this is on the
That's in
screen there, yeah.
San Fernando Valley.
3rd of October, yeah.
And we were there approximately 3 weeks, and he sent a group of people back to the desert. And this included myself and this Joan Wildbush, a guy named TJ, I'm not sure of his name. And there were, when we arrived, a girl named Bo, about 20 or 21 maybe, Mary Brenner, she's a college graduate, I believe, and a girl named Sherry, the same Sherry I mentioned before. I'm not sure how old she is. I think she's 17 now, or 16. And these people were all there when we got there. And after that, there was a supply run made to Las Vegas, on which Joan and the girl named Sherry went. And when they came back, there was a big hurry to get all the people out except Joan and myself, because, as I was to later find out, the sheriff was coming. And the sheriff from Shoshone, Mr. Don Ward, came with a deputy and some park rangers and questioned and talked to Juanita and myself, Juanita being Joan Wildbush, and took me aside and asked me about marijuana, and I said I didn't know anything about it then. And then after they left, Joan told me what he was talking about, and the fact was that one of them had given marijuana to the sheriff's niece or granddaughter when they were in Shoshone on their way back up with supplies. And when they left that time, Charlie's people, it was the last time I would see them for about 6 or 7 months. When they left, they said they would probably be back up to get us, but they didn't know when or exactly how. And we had supplies at that time enough to last approximately 2 weeks if we ate 1 meal a day. And shortly thereafter, about a week, a man named Paul Crockett and another Bob Berry came up and drove into the yard. And I got to talking to Paul, and this is the first time I'd met Paul. And I talked to him quite a bit. And during this time, I was supposed to be making love with Juanita, but I had my schedule fixed to where I would be asleep when she was awake, and when she was asleep, I would be awake. So I learned to stay up all night and sleep during the day. And when Paul was around, I'd talk to him, and he started showing me what was going on at that point, what I was doing, and he tried to straighten out my mind as to whether I was really dead or alive, because I didn't know. Charlie had told me that I was living in death and that I was supposed to give up my world so that I could have his, and that by giving up, God would come through me, and I would just be a hole in the infinite, as he says he is. I stayed at the ranch from the time I got there just before the sheriff came, and I've been at the ranch up until the 2nd of October, '69. And during this time, approximately 6 or 7 months went by before I ever saw Charlie or any of his people again. During this time, Paul
Watkins testified at the trials, didn't he? And and Leslie's subsequent trials as well. I don't know if he was at Texas, probably Texas as well. Yeah, but no, he turned against the family. Yeah, didn't he? But he died, didn't he? I know he's dead. But there's quite a few interviews of him about as well. That TLB last week, the Truth on TLB forum, they interviewed Paul Watkins. That's on YouTube as well, so we can look at that another week as well. People are interested in Paul Watkins, yeah. Yeah, no, he pretty quickly renounced the family. He left before the murders happened, even, I think. Yeah, he left, yeah.
had offered me a job to go up and down the mountains and to help him get gold ore, down from some mines that they had in that area. And I'd been doing that steadily all this time during the 6 or 7 months, going up and down the mountains and crushing rocks by hand and learning all about gold and taking an interest in it. And finally they offered me to come in on the deal with them. And I've got my name on some claim papers up there on mines that haven't been filed in Independence. But my name is on some claims up there. On one called the Gold Dollar, and when they were thinking about claiming the Barker's Ranch, my name was on the claim paper there, and it should be in the monument there at the ranch. Approximately a month ago, Charles Manson and several of
Tape
his
started
group
again
came
there
back
as well.
up. He came up with
Again
8
there.
people, and they were all sporting knives in and saying how bad it was getting in the city, and that Helter Skelter, that's what he calls the Negro Revolt. He says the Negroes are going to revolt and kill all the white men except the ones that are hiding in the desert. And he said that it was getting worse and worse, and that he wanted to hide in the desert. And I believe he's on parole, and he's out of his parole area when he's up there. And when he came back, he started his games of trying to get me to go back with him. And he said that he'd release me from no agreements, that I was still his, and that I should be able to do anything he said and not think about it, because that's what love does. Love doesn't fight, it gives up. And to give up would be to be God. Charlie, or Charles, says that giving up is to become God, and that everything is God, and that eating meat is like eating yourself. And anytime there's an animal there, any meat that comes in is given to the animal. And if there's food enough only for the dog to eat, the dog gets the food. And the people are supposed to suck on each other and get their nourishment that way, because everything's an oral fixation, a complex or something. And he calls guns phallic symbols, big phallic symbols that guys get their rocks off by shooting. And he says that people who need guns are the ones that are going to die. And people that have guns are the ones that he's going to kill. And that when Helter Skelter comes down, that the cities are going to be mass hysteria, and that the cops won't know what to do, the piggies, he calls them, and that the beast will fall, and the black man will take over. And when he was up there, when he came back this time, approximately a month ago, he started his program to get me back into the group. And since he's been there, I've been threatened with knives, and he said that I'm willing to give my life up for you, and I'm willing to let you kill me, so that means I can kill you. And he's talked about killing a Negro militant leader in Los Angeles, and he's talked about killing a guy named Shorty there too, or having his people do it, cutting his head off and then having the girls bury the body somewhere. About a week went by, and then a lot of dune buggies started showing up. And drove in a yellow one and painted it, cut off some of the back, some of the plastic work or the body part to make it unnoticeable or unrecognizable, and threw dirt on it while spray painting. And during this time, he's brought in new tires, new batteries, all sorts of tools, several sets of tool boxes, and some of the vehicles, yes, cases of oil, and some of the vehicles included a red Toyota Jeep, and a blue sparkle dune buggy, 2 or 3 yellow ones that I've seen, and he's painted all of these. And one of the yellow ones had a black vinyl type zipper top to be put up on it. And he's told us every time a vehicle's come in that it isn't hot, except for one that he said was on a test ride that he'd gotten in LA, or one of his people had gone in and asked for the keys for a test ride and took off with it. And he said that everything he had up there was legal and that nothing was hot, and that they'd gotten it from credit cards and somewhere else. And he implied that they had a lot of money, but didn't say where it came from. But during this time, I've heard people talk about being communists. This one girl, Gypsy, talked about being a communist 2 or 3 times. Said that she'd been a communist since '58 in New York, and that her parents had had communist leaders over to her house, and that she was a true blue communist, but that even the communists were wrong in some places. And Charlie's mentioned that the communists had a good thing, but it wouldn't work either, because they didn't give up and they didn't make love together. Since he's been up there, I've had my life threatened several times, and I've seen him jerk people around by the hair, hold a knife to their throat, and say, "You know I can kill you, don't you?" And then after that he says, "But I wouldn't, because you're one of us." And I've heard that since they've been up there, he said, or someone has said, I'm not sure it was him.
I heard him.
Yes, he said it, that they have 100 tabs of LSD and mescaline, and that they're expecting a big kilo of hashish. During this time, he's talked to me several times about how I should give up and be willing to do anything he wanted me to do. And at one point, he was saying that if I loved him and was willing to give up, and since it was all a game, life was a game and death was a game, that it wasn't real, that I should go walk to Shoshone, take a big, some kind of a machete-like thing, sneak into Sheriff Ward's house and cut his throat. That was if I loved him. And he wanted me to do it, but he never pushed it any further than that. He mentioned it the one time and then said several times, or his people had talked about how easy it would be to take over Shoshone, to wipe out the people in it. And he's talked about killing off the people in the desert at this time, one at a time. And if any police came up, he would kill them and leave their uniforms laying out as if the body had just disappeared from it. I've seen him with 2 shotguns. One is a double-barrel over and under shotgun. I guess it's used for skeet shooting. And the other is a 12-gauge pump shotgun. And I've seen approximately a knife on everyone, and Charlie sometimes has 2 or 3 with him. And I've seen him that he can throw a knife approximately 10 or 15 feet and be deadly accurate with it. And that he's mentioned that he wouldn't be taken alive, and that he would think no more of killing one of us than he would of going and stepping on a flower. In fact, he'd rather do that than step on a flower. He said that killing of a person isn't as bad as the people who go around with their big phallic symbols and shoot birds and hunt and fish and do all those hunting or sporting things. And he's mentioned that he would take great pride in killing a cock or a piggy, and that he'd take as many as he could. And he said that he was going to learn the desert and hide on it and sit up with his big binoculars and watch them when they came in. And he said that he was going to stash dune buggies and vehicles all over the desert. And he was going to stash supplies all over the desert. And that he said once that if he didn't make it, then either his kids or someone else's kids would do it. That the love was in the children, and that you had to set the children free. And free to him is making them do obscene sex acts.
The stuff Susan Atkins and Leslie came out with as well. The Leslie tapes are again really hard to listen to because the audio quality is so bad, but she comes out with loads of crazy stuff as well. Leslie, they all just sound so drug damaged, and Susan Atkins as well. Like most of it's written but the stuff she said to people for their books and the stuff she said at the penalty phase. I've read out a lot of what she said at the penalty phase. And I'm going to start making more long form videos, edited videos, using those clips to show more of what Susan said at the penalty phase and all that sort of thing. But yeah, they all sound very, very drug damaged, and they're all saying all this kind of shit. Obviously, whatever Charlie was saying to them went in. They all memorized it a lot, and it all sounds very the same. Yeah, they all memorized it very well.
When they're old enough to crawl and old enough to use their mouth. Since he's been there this time, he's stayed, I guess, 2 nights, and each night he's been there, he's had from 8 people, I guess, approximately 8 people each time. And he builds a bonfire out in the middle of the yard using all the wood that's available. And he gets a guitar and has everybody smoke marijuana and gets them all stoned. And then they sing songs. And one of the songs is a repeat after me song, in which he'll start the song and say, "Who's God?" The people around him will answer back, "Who's God?" Then he'll say, "You're God." And they'll answer back, "You're God." And he'll say, "I'm God." And they'll say, "I'm God." And then he'll say, as in a statement, "I'm God." And they'll answer back the same way. And he gets them into an emotional frenzy, and this is supposed to lead to sex. If it's necessary to testify as to the fact that he's driven a dune buggy that is hot, or anything else about testifying to anything I said in a court, I'm willing to do that.
We'll close this interview with Brooks Ramsey Poston at 12:35.
Well, that's it, is it? Right, that's the end of it. And I think that's the only thing that CI Driver put up of his interviews. But like I said, there's that TV show there. You saw the thumbnail of it in the end there. I think, yeah, if I watch that, it'll make the stream down for too long. But yeah, I was thinking maybe it's all. God, I've messed my hair up when I took my headphones off. Wait a second. No. But yeah, it's interesting what he says. And like I say, he was with them right up until Parker Ranch, and he saw a lot. And it's interesting him saying about, yeah, people coming up and going to the houses to get what they wanted or whatever, yeah. And yeah, he mentioned some interesting people, doesn't he? And yeah, like I say, they all said all this stuff to the police and on these interview tapes, for Bugliosi to cherry pick to use to make, a distraction from whatever the real motive was, which was the fact that half of them were drug dealers basically, and they'd all been selling drugs and to the people that, or some of the people that they killed. And who knows what the LaBiancas were really into. It's like very, very difficult to pin down exactly what the hell the motive for the LaBiancas was. But yeah, it's thought to be to do with Lino in some way, at least. Lino and Charlie. And the fact that the family parked their black bus at the house next to the LaBiancas before they were at the ranch. And they possibly met Linda Kasabian while they had the black bus parked there as well, like a long time before they said that they met Linda. That's another thing. There's so much that we don't really know and that we haven't been told. They've lied so much. But my fans going really loud. Hopefully the noise cancelling is cancelling that out. It's unplugged and everything. Yeah. Yeah, it was all drugs and porn related and by extension mob related, yeah. Well, a lot of people dispute the mob related thing, don't they? But I don't think people realise, yeah, it doesn't have to be like high level mob related people. It's just organised crime is a very wide net, isn't it? It doesn't have to have been like really heavy gangster related. The high up people, you know what I mean? Low level in a low level way. Yeah, there was mob involvement possibly from Lino LaBianca. And did Joe Dorgan, who was Susan LaBerge's boyfriend at the time, Rosemary LaBianca's daughter. Was it something to do with him and Tex? Did they really know each other because they lived in the same street or something, didn't they? And all that, yeah. I've done streams about the LaBiancas and we talked about that weird hypothesis someone had come up with that, yeah, Tex and Joe Dorgan were working together to try and overthrow drug dealers in the area. Yeah, I think he was with them right up until they were arrested. I don't know if he was arrested with them. Yeah, I assume he would have been, yeah. And he talked about, yeah, them getting arrested at the Spiral Staircase house before they went to Spun Ranch, didn't he? As well. All sorts. Yeah. Yeah, I think I've seen that. And yeah, there's numerous books, isn't there? Well, there's the Killing of Sharon Tate book. So what's his name wrote? Lawrence Schiller, that she gave to Lawrence, that she said to Lawrence Schiller, but that is just a load of crazy stuff she made up off the top of her head, I think, isn't it? That it's not really worth reading, yeah. Yeah. Frankie Carbo is more important than people realise. What to this case? Do you think? Yeah, because a lot of people, yeah, are cynical about the mob involvement, aren't they? Yeah, but I can see how, yeah, it goes that far. and the reason why they're covering stuff up as well. The reasons why they had to cover stuff up probably go deeper than we'll ever realise. You know, like why did they go to such lengths to not? Because you know, why were these people so important? It wasn't just to protect the victims' reputations. Basically, these people weren't that important, were they? You know, it was those other reasons. Has to be like deeper reasons than just protecting the memories of these people. You know, or whatever. Hmm. Mhm. Yeah, like I said as well, I'm going to do some more edited videos, actually, which I'll sort of do. So I'll do a premiere, have everyone watch it for, you know, but it'll like air for the first time and there's a chat. I've done it a few times with other videos, but yeah, I'm going to actually learn to use Canva for video editing. The thing I use to do the thumbnails and the presentations that I do, you can edit videos on it. So yeah, I'm going to do, yeah, the first one is going to be talking about the human trafficking aspect of this case and the lover boy method of human trafficking, as they say in Charles Manson, and how that works. Because that comes up, people were talking about that earlier, weren't they? Like, why weren't the girls leaving? It's because of this method of human trafficking that he used. It involved this abusive relationship and acting like he was their boyfriend, you know, and they all thought that they were, you know, beholden to him. It was like a relationship, wasn't it? You know, an abusive relationship, complicated situation. Even though, you know, they were not physically restrained and locked in cages. You know, they couldn't leave because of the mental abuse as well, the mental psychological situation they were under. You know. Mm. Yeah, that's it. What wasn't the mob involved with? Sorry, someone said yeah. What wasn't the mob involved? There's an interview. What did I've never seen that. I've never been able to find Joel Port's interview with Charles Manson. I found obviously text talking to him, and I think there might be one of Leslie talking to Joel Ford because Joel Ford was the psychiatrist for the prosecution. He was the one that worked for Bugliosi, basically. And yeah, I would like to see that if you know where it is. Yeah, so I've never seen it. Yeah, it is on YouTube, is it? Oh, what? It's so it's a recording of an interview, is it? There is audio. So what might you say? What there is? Right. I'll have to. Yeah, I'll have to look for that. I've never seen that. Yeah, I've never seen any interviews of except for the later one, the last Manson interview with the psychiatrist. It's a written report, and yeah, the most interesting thing is this what they call it test. You know, where you look at the blots and they ask you what it looks like, and he gives his responses to what he thinks he sees when they show you the Rorschach response test. I think it's called. Yeah, yeah. The Charles Manson, that's interesting. But yeah, the actual report is quite disappointing because it was around the time that the Unabomber or something had just happened in America. So they were looking at Manson like like a terrorist because of the race war he was trying to incite, that sort of thing, you know. So that was all they were looking at. They didn't really get any insight into him as a person. Court concluded Manson wasn't insane, yeah. That's it. Well, he would. And he said Tex wasn't as well. He was one of the only psychiatrists that said he wasn't. Most said yes. Yeah. Like the video and subscribe if you haven't already. Yeah. Cool. But yeah, Joel Ford, yeah, well, I've explained that for people watching. Well, yeah, Joel Ford's the psychiatrist for the prosecution who was would have had to assess their sanity. We need a chance to explain, and Manson says, "You're not giving me anything. You're asking me for something." Yeah. Mm. Yeah, it's very telling about who he was and what his game was. Yeah. That's it. Well, he didn't like the psychiatrist, did he? I think. Well, I think he thought he could outwit them or something, didn't he? Probably. Yeah, and he probably was his own worst enemy in that way. Because he ended up being in Vacaville for quite a few years, didn't he? And was treated for schizophrenia. And yeah, there's not a lot known about all that because they don't release the records of it, do they? But yeah, he there must be a lot of psychiatric reports on him that are just unseen. Yeah, that they don't want to share. Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah, that's it. He did the same to all these girls. He wanted them all to, suffer like he did, basically, didn't he? Put them all through it, and didn't really care about them. That's the thing. People think that he loved them, but he didn't really. He didn't care about any of them. They were, objects to him, and they waited on him hand and foot. He couldn't live without them, though. He couldn't even find clothes for himself and that. They found his clothing for him, and they fed him all the time. He couldn't make him get his own food and all this sort of thing. They looked after him. He couldn't survive without them either. And also, profited from them, didn't we? Basically, treated them appallingly. Like I say, I was, quite well, not shocked actually, really, to hear the Brooks Poston saying that he saw the girls being forced to do things during these orgies. So it wasn't all willing, happy fun that they had. Yeah, they were being forced to do stuff they didn't want to do. It's horrible, isn't it? We've got 54 people here. Yeah, I think we're coming everyone anyway. I say next week. There's so many other interviews. Like I say, Paul Watkins. I saw that forum had interviewed Paul Watkins. I'll listen to a few other things during the week and see, because that was quite clear as well, wasn't it, Brooks Poston? Like I said, and there's a TV interview with Brooks Poston that was quite good as well. I've watched that. But it's about half an hour long, so it would have made the live stream drag on too long to watch it tonight. So yeah, not sure what I'll do next week yet. We could listen to, but with Brooks Poston, the logical guy to next listen to is that Paul Cockett guy as well. And Paul Watkins, he's involved with Paul Watkins, so yeah. But he's another guy, with the people when they were running away from Charlie went and stayed with, and it's another the guy, Gola Walsh. Oh yeah, it's fucking just another whole weird branch of it. But he's nothing to do with Charlie. I don't know if he even met Charlie. Yeah, he helped them to get away from Charlie and unfucks their minds from Charlie, basically. Yeah. So we could listen to him next week. Yeah. Yeah, let's get this wrong. And you just use it to get them behind bars. And he did know everything about TLB and was heavily involved. Yeah, well, that's it. And in California as well, being an accessory is the same as being a murderer, isn't it? It's one of the only states where you're charged for murder as well for being an accessory. And he was definitely an accessory. I mean, I know some people are cynical about whether he went up there. I can totally believe he went up there after the murders had happened, just to convince himself that they'd really done it. So I don't think he thought they had it in them. I don't believe he expected them to kill everyone, and that he ordered them to kill everyone. I think something went horribly wrong, and he went up there just to bloody see for himself what they'd actually done. He couldn't believe it. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I think he went up. Yeah, you think he did, well, yeah, of course he did. Yeah. Well, I don't think he was that smart as well. That's the thing. People say he wouldn't be stupid enough to go up there. But I don't think anything they did suggests they were smart. They did lots of stupid things. And Manson did lots of stupid things, didn't he? Like when they were on the way up to Barker Ranch, they set fire to an earth-moving vehicle and stuff like that, didn't they? But drew attention to themselves, drew unnecessary attention to themselves. And he was stupidly arrogant to the police. If you read the Spahn Ranch raid report, I've done a stream about the Spahn Ranch raid. And he was telling the police, when the police were stood outside the ranch talking to him, he was saying that he had someone pointing a gun at him, a sniper pointing a gun at him at that moment, and could have him killed at any minute. You don't say things like that to cops in America, do you, for fuck's sake? And all this sort of thing. And also they found a cartridge of bullets for an automatic rifle, on the road. And Charles Manson rang up and asked if they had it, or they rang and they said, yeah, you can come and get it if you want, but he didn't come and get it, so he was like boasting about having weapons and all this sort of shit. So yeah, he didn't care. I think he wanted to go back to prison, to be honest. I don't think he could cope with life on the outside anymore. And I think that once the kids had gone out and murdered people like that, he was freaked out. He realised he couldn't control them. I don't think it was what he actually wanted them to do at all, and he was actually quite shocked and didn't know what to do because he couldn't hand them in, because then he'd be a snitch, wouldn't he? You know what I mean? So like, what could he do? What else could he do? Just had to get them arrested, didn't he? Basically, get them all arrested, hand himself in as well. But yeah, I think was probably so institutionalized because he spent most of his adult life in prison, didn't he? and obviously wasn't doing very well as an adult, was he? Outside. Life had got very fucking complicated for him very quickly, hadn't it? And he was his own worst enemy. Everywhere he went, he had to try and dominate all the other men, which caused problems everywhere, didn't it? Couldn't really get anywhere in the music business because he was too awkward to be recorded, and freaked people out doing shit like sitting there twirling knives on his leg and stuff like that, People didn't like it, did they? It's a shame. Yeah, they were speeding as well. That's it with Tex by the sound of things. Like I say, I've done a whole stream about his drug history from his psychiatry report, and he talks about, when he's listing off the pills that he took, most of them I managed to find out from because he reads up the colours of pills, and most of them are amphetamines. I worked out, I was able to find out from my research, and he was supposed to be doing speed the night of the murders, wasn't he? And at the penalty phase, both Leslie and Susan said they heard that Tex had taken STP, which is a mixture of speed and LSD, the night of CLO and the night of the LaBiancas. So Tex was supposed to be on all sorts. And Bugliosi tried to say that they weren't on any drugs and tried to say that they were clean the night of the murders because he didn't want them getting off with insanity, did he? But repeatedly at the penalty phase, Susan said they were on LSD that night as well. Crazy. Right, well, this has gone on for an hour now anyway. So I could stop and do an after show. Just have a 5-minute break, stretch my legs. Hello, Beckham. Yeah, thanks for coming, everyone. Like I say, next week, so I'm not sure what I'm going to do next now. I think Paul Cockett is a good place to go next after Brooks Poston. Or we could do more of Brooks Poston because, like I say, there's another good interview with him being interviewed on the television and his music. We could listen to some of the music for the after show, actually, couldn't we? Yeah. Just give me 5 minutes to go make another drink and we'll come back and do an after show. Yeah. Yeah, okay, I'll end this now. And like I say, give me 5 minutes if I want to do another drink. Oh, yeah, the Joel Fort interview. What if there's audio of Charles Manson being interviewed by Joel Fort? I'll try and find that. Yeah, that'll be interesting. Definitely. Right, yeah, and Joel Fort also was involved with the Patty Hearst trial as well. He was like a bloody celebrity psychiatrist. Loads of weird trials. He was like a celebrity psychiatrist for all these trials. But yes, anyway, I'll end this now, and I'll come back and do an after show. And I'll see you next week, whatever I do. Thanks for coming, and I'll see you in 5 minutes if you're hanging around for the after show. Thank you.